Chapter 13, Taking Stock. As I've shared, since I came into exile in 1959, we have had only 2 substantial periods of discussions with Beijing. Neither of these have led to a stage where real substantive negotiation at the highest level could take place. Naturally, I have asked myself why these rounds of dialogue did not lead to a negotiated solution to the issue of Tibet. Looking back, when we had our first series of conversations, spurred by Deng's overture to my brother in March 1979, and the latter's subsequent meeting with Hu Yaobang, we thought there was a real potential opening. On our part, we had placed much hope in the possibility of really getting to the specifics of how, within the framework of Deng Xiaoping's original statement, except for independence, everything is negotiable. A lasting solution could be found that was mutually acceptable. The aim was that these dialogues would culminate in an agreement formally signed by the Chinese leader and me. At least we knew that, at the very highest level of the Chinese leadership, there was an expressed willingness to talk. Moreover, it seemed clear that the Chinese government was genuinely open to serious discussions about unresolved international issues that remained at the heart of the People's Republic of China's formation as a modern country. For in the same month, March 1979, Deng invited the governor of Hong Kong for discussions about the future of what was then a British colony, which was followed by a series of international negotiations, concluding in 1984 with the agreement to hand over the colony to China in 1997. During one of the earlier rounds of meetings in 1982, the Chinese side shared with our delegation a copy of the text of the Special Administrative Region, SAR, being proposed that could be applied to the status of Hong Kong, which was later adopted as Article 31 of the Constitution of the People's Republic of China, and suggested that we study it, since the proposed Special Administrative Region could have relevance for Tibet. My delegation understood this to mean that crafting a solution along the lines of Article 31 could be possible, which would conform to the basic principle enunciated by Deng. In the end, though, as we've seen, the Chinese side showed no serious interest. With regard to the second period of dialogues, 2002 to 2010, looking back with the benefit of hindsight, I wonder if there was ever a genuine intention on the part of the Chinese leadership for substantive discussion. Our conversations never went beyond the level of that wing of the United Front, within the Chinese Communist Party charged with dealing with national minorities. One might ask why we persisted in this context. The answer is simple. In the end, the problem of Tibet should be and can only be solved by the Tibetan people and the Chinese people themselves, sitting down and talking. There is no other viable option. By virtue of having become the Dalai Lama, it has been my responsibility and my role in life to speak and to keep on speaking on behalf of the Tibetan people. One explicit response from Beijing to our Memorandum on Genuine Autonomy for the Tibetan People came in 2013 in the form of China's White Paper on Tibet, entitled Development and Progress of Tibet. It accused us of having put forward the so-called concepts of Greater Tibet and a high degree of autonomy, which in fact go against China's actual conditions and violate the Constitution and relevant laws. Perhaps the accusation about Greater Tibet was a reference to our proposal that all Tibetan areas, composed of the 3 provinces of Uzang, Kham, and Amdo, be governed under a single administration to ensure a uniform policy across the Tibetan plateau. This is, in fact, not a new idea. Before his death in 1989, the Panchen Lama, acting in his capacity as the Vice Chairman of the National People's Congress within the People's Republic of China, stated that the desire for the establishment of an autonomous region for a unified Tibetan nationality was appropriate and in accordance with the legal rules. By legal rules, the Panchen Lama was referring to the Chinese Communist Party's own nationalities doctrine. This states that autonomous territorial units should correspond to places where nationalities live in compact and contiguous areas. According to this doctrine, the entire Tibetan plateau, composed of the three provinces of Uzang, Kham, and Amdo, should be within a single autonomous region. Also, earlier in 1956, a special committee was set up by the Chinese central government that included the senior Communist Party member Sangye Yeshe, known also as Tien Bao, a rare early Tibetan communist who had the confidence of Chairman Mao, to draft a detailed plan for the integration of the Tibetan areas into a single autonomous region. This initiative was thwarted by ultra-leftist elements within the Chinese Communist Party. There is also a precedent in the People's Republic of China's dealings with other nationalities, where districts once split into separate areas were later brought under a single administration. In 1979, for example, the breakaway areas of Inner Mongolia were brought back within the autonomous region of Inner Mongolia. The heart of the matter is really about what might be the best way to protect the Tibetan people with their distinct language, culture, and spiritual heritage. In our dealings with Beijing, on our side, there was indeed a clarity of purpose and a recognizable line of command by which my envoys were reporting directly to me, and I, in turn, was speaking on behalf of the Tibetan people, both within Tibet and in exile. Especially when the second series of dialogues began, the leaders of the team were explicitly designated as my envoys. This meant that the Chinese side would always know who they were talking to. But for us as outsiders, it was difficult to know whom exactly one was dealing with on the Chinese side. First of all, when leadership change takes place in the Chinese Communist Party, what that means can be opaque. In retrospect, there was a radical shift between the era of Mao and that of Deng. Yet the nuances of change between Deng and Jiang Zemin, between Jiang and Hu Jintao, and between Hu and Xi Jinping were extremely difficult to gauge and navigate in real time. Moreover, in dealing with any Chinese leader, it is not clear if one is speaking to an empowered individual or someone who is caught in the complex web of power relations with other members of the Politburo. For example, the overtures of Jiang Zemin in 1998 may have been sincere, but they seem to have been thwarted within the leadership. In view of this point, since Xi Jinping has emerged as the most powerful Chinese leader since Deng Xiaoping, I had hoped that he would seize the opportunity for a bold vision to solve the issue of Tibet. I was aware that President Xi had made positive remarks about the importance of Buddhism, such as in China's struggle against a moral void that has manifested in widespread corruption. This view would later be confirmed when he visited the headquarters of the United Nations, educational, scientific, and cultural organization, UNESCO, in Paris, where he made a remark about how Buddhism had made a deep impact on the religious belief, philosophy, literature, and customs of the Chinese people. Some people also told me that Xi's mother was a practicing Buddhist. And of course, as mentioned earlier, I had personally known Xi Jinping's father, having met him during my visit to Beijing in 1954 to 1955. Xi's father, who had suffered during the Cultural Revolution, even though he was an ally of Deng Xiaoping, had opposed the brutal crackdown against the students' protest of Tiananmen. So I had hopes that President Xi would have more personal empathy for the Tibetan people. In fact, when it was announced that Xi Jinping would visit Delhi in 2014, I even communicated my wish to meet him in person. Unfortunately, nothing came of this gesture. two important questions come to mind. Were the Chinese ever serious about substantive negotiations on Tibet? What lessons should we learn from our history of dealing with the People's Republic of China thus far for the future of our struggle for freedom? Some of our international supporters have made the point that the Chinese side was never sincere in their intention to resolve the situation. They say that what mattered to China was to be seen talking rather than to actually talk. Its motives for this in the 1980s would have been to facilitate the negotiations about Hong Kong and Macau, which were, of course, a huge international triumph for Deng Xiaoping. Later, to enable China to open its economy internationally, and then to attract international acceptance of its coming of age on the world stage, such as the hosting of the Summer Olympic Games in 2008. I knew Deng Xiaoping personally in the 1950s, and when I received his overture, I genuinely believed that he was serious. This belief was strengthened further when Hu Yaobang visited Tibet and publicly acknowledged some of the mistakes the Chinese Communist Party had made in relation to the Tibetan people, followed by Hu Yaobang's meeting with my brother, Gyalo Thondup. Yet the discussions that ensued led nowhere, their proposals never going beyond the issue of my personal status and return. Let me turn to the second question. What lessons should we learn from our experience in these dialogues? First and foremost, once both sides have made the commitment to the path of negotiation, there needs to be genuine trust in each other's good intention. This is crucial so that events in the world, there will always be events during a long period of dialogue, do not derail the ongoing dialogue. Second, as part of the protection of mutual trust, there needs to be an open line of communication, so there is a mechanism to immediately allay any possible suspicions or doubt that could arise for whatever reasons, including especially public statements from either party. Third, in any negotiation where there is enormous power disparity, as was the case with our dialogue, the stronger side needs to demonstrate greater magnanimity and respect to its dialogue partner. I'm told that in a negotiation there will be a give and take on both sides, and my approach has always been to state honestly what I think the solution we are striving to obtain should look like. As my two envoys, as well as their colleagues who joined them in the various rounds of talk know, my approach in our dialogues has been sincere and simple. As a monk, honesty matters to me deeply. So I told my envoys that I wanted to present in clear and candid terms what my actual objectives were, rather than starting with some initial negotiating position that could then be pared down to what I was actually seeking. Hence, the proposals I have made represent, as I have already stated, major departures from a demand for a restoration of Tibetan independence. They entail significant accommodation on our part. As a people of an occupied country, we Tibetans have the right to the restoration of our independence. But for reasons I have explained above, I believe that it is possible for us Tibetans to find a way to live within the family of the People's Republic of China, provided there is a genuine respect for our rights, dignity, and needs as a people with unique linguistic, cultural, religious, and historical heritage. To date, I do not believe Beijing has succeeded in creating a multi-nation state within which the Tibetan people could truly feel that they have a home. In other words, it has failed to realize what was envisioned in the important part of its name, People's Republic of China, whose Chinese equivalence contains the word Gunghe, Tibetan, Chithun, which connotes a harmonious union. I often cite the example of the Soviet Union, formerly known as the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, before its collapse, as an example at least of a serious attempt at creating a modern multi-nation state. Unlike the name People's Republic of China, the words Russia or Russian do not figure anywhere in the name of the modern composite state. This simple fact made it easier for non-Russians to identify with the new state, and made it possible also for even non-Russians like Stalin and Brezhnev to become leaders of the Soviet Union. Communist China, on the other hand, has not yet succeeded in creating an inclusive modern multi-nation state within which the Tibetans could feel at home. The simple truth is no Tibetan will ever say, "I am a Chinese." My stance on how best to resolve the issue of Tibet has been consistent since direct discussions with Beijing began in 1979. I have called this the middle way approach. At the core of this approach was the search for a robust framework that would offer the ability for the Tibetans to continue to survive as a distinct people with dignity, with their unique language, culture, ecology, and Buddhist faith. Furthermore, in my approach, I have always striven to respect the principle that it is important to take seriously the perspectives and interests of both sides. What matters most to China seems to be territorial integrity and stability, while what matters most to us is a genuine autonomy that guarantees self-governance in the arena of language, culture, ecology, and religion. Even if and when a mutually acceptable agreement is found through negotiation, a robust compliance mechanism is essential to ensure that both sides abide by the terms agreed upon. I say this from my own personal experience and from observing the situation of Hong Kong in the last decade. While our formal dialogue with Beijing came to an end in 2010, up until 2019, I did maintain informal and, at the time, confidential contacts with Beijing leadership through individual Chinese. Among those who came to see me and speak with me were a few who did seem to have access to important leaders in Beijing. Some of those who came to speak with me had a singular aim: to persuade me to return home. At these meetings, I made it clear that at present such discussion was quite premature. I said that we should instead work toward paving the way for me to visit China and Tibet, especially on a pilgrimage. Perhaps Beijing felt that, given my age, I might be more amenable now to going back home. Behind this informal invitation might also have been the belief that once the Dalai Lama returned, the issue of Tibet would be resolved, with the question answered in the form of my permanent return. If this is the case, this would mean that after several leadership changes over 4 decades, and despite 2 series of dialogues, 1979 to 1989 and 2002 to 2010, Beijing has not moved beyond the 5 points Hu Yaobang presented, all pertaining exclusively to my own status, with no attempt at addressing the real issue, the well-being of the Tibetan people. It is most unfortunate that Beijing did not seize on the opportunity I had offered to resolve the issue of Tibet in a manner that is mutually beneficial. I do not believe that Beijing failed to understand what I was offering. The only rational conclusion I can draw is simply this: although there might have been at one point a genuine wish and desire to resolve the issue of Tibet through negotiation, there was neither the courage nor the necessary political will to do so on the part of Chinese leadership. It is my sincere hope that Beijing will find the necessary courage to resolve the long-standing issue of Tibet through peaceful means before it is too late.